Chapter 33, Chapter 33. Chapter 33, A Moment of Pause. So, Ash took a breath, his story winding down as he continued to stare intently at the glass sitting empty on the table before him. Now you know. Working with Mewtwo to free Sabrina, all the fighting on Cinnabar, signing up, temporarily with Team Rocket. That's the whole story. He risked a glance at Brock, who sat silently beside him at the long table in the otherwise empty cafeteria of the Saffron Gym. Several long seconds passed and both gym leaders only stared at their long-since exhausted drinks. Well, Brock muttered at length, his tone as stony as the expression on his face. That's something. He shifted in his seat a little without turning to look at Ash. I did say I'd let you finish without interrupting, and I did, but I've got to say Ash, you've changed. His gaze darkened and he turned to the younger gym leader. I don't think it's been for the better. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Ash glanced at Brock from the corner of his eye but immediately focused all his attention on the empty glass. I know, Ash sighed, rubbing the side of his face. I'm sorry, I just... He trailed off. Since Celadon, I thought I knew what I was supposed to do, but then I got through Saffron and saw what Elm did on Cinnabar, then when Giovanni came out of nowhere... He again stopped short and closed his eyes. I'm really confused. In the beginning it was simple. Go from town to town, rally everyone against Team Rocket, bam. He slapped his palm on the table, happy ending. Now though, I realized I was never in control and it was never that simple. Brock raised an eyebrow and leaned back in his chair. How do you figure? Asked the elder trainer. Misty, Ash stopped for a second and fought back a tightening of his features. I know what she and I had was genuine, but in retrospect I don't think it started out that way. Did you know she was a fugitive from Team Rocket and taking them out started out as her idea? Sure, I jumped on board quick, but the long and short of it is that I think she was manipulating me to get revenge. Then when I met Mewtwo in Lavender, he helped me because I was in a position to help him against Team Rocket. I thought he was an ally, but he was manipulating me to get at Team Rocket too. And now Team Rocket. I'm positive Giovanni's only helping Janine to buy my help against Mewtwo. You think? Brock scoffed. Well, Ash winced at the blatant sarcasm in Brock's tone. He didn't finish the statement. Brock took a long breath and sighed. I'm sorry, he said. That was harsh of me. I just wanted to believe it. Ash set his glass down and pressed his hands together. I just wanted to buy it all, so bad, to believe he really did just want to be my friend. You know, I can count on one hand the people who've helped me without any ulterior motives. He let his hands rest flat on the table and his shoulders sank. I'm tired, Brock, he muttered. I've told myself 100 times that I was going to take charge, do things for myself, be a hero. But every time I turn around I find out that I'm just someone else's pawn. Shaking his head, Brock turned in his chair and faced Ash directly. Ash, are we still friends? Flinching at the question, Ash took a second to regain his composure. I'd like to think so, he said. That's not a real answer, Brock retorted. Don't think about it, just tell me. Now, are we still friends? He spoke each word of the question clearly. Straightening up a little, Ash nodded. Yeah, he answered. We are. Then as your friend, Brock looked Ash in the eye, I'm going to tell you point blank that I think you've made some pretty shitty decisions. He paused for only a second as the resolve began to drain from Ash's features. Taking off after Celadon, giving up the fight against Team Rocket so fast, letting this Giovanni character get inside your head and then agreeing to work for him with barely any question. Brock loosed a tense sigh. You're complaining about being manipulated, but you're letting people control you. Ash, and I say this as a friend, you need to man up and take control for yourself. A pause grew between the two trainers as Ash sat with his jaw slightly slack and Brock glared at the younger trainer. After several seconds had rolled by, Brock's expression gradually grew lighter until a smile settled on his features and he reached out and put a hand on Ash's shoulder. None of that's to say I'm not glad to see you're back and not dead, or that I don't want to be your friend anymore. Brock gave Ash a shake. It's really good to see you. And I appreciate you telling me everything. Letting himself sigh and loosen up a bit, Ash relaxed back into his chair. Even though I'm sort of working for Team Rocket? He asked. I fully expect that to be a temporary arrangement, Brock shrugged. If it's not then I'm going to have to knock some sense into you the hard way. Don't worry about it, Ash crossed his arms. As soon as Janine recovers and Mewtwo's taken care of, I'm done with them. Team Rocket will be back on my hit list. That or... He smirked, I'll oust Giovanni and take over, run things different. Now that, Brock grinned and picked up his empty glass, holding it out towards Ash, is the best idea I've heard in a long time. Here's to kicking the bad guys in the ass. And looking good doing it, Ash picked up his glass and knocked it against Brock's. The next 2 hours passed by uneventfully as Ash and Brock sat in the cafeteria and just talked, neither one actively steering the conversation towards the recent events on the world stage or the upcoming battles to be fought. Mostly their topics revolved around the recent dealings between Pewter and Cerulean. Brock's naturally stony demeanor grew notably less emotional when he commented on how he suspected his sibling's death to be a grave misunderstanding between Cerulean's and Pewter's scouts, given that neither side had any desire to inflame the other into a full-scale confrontation. The older gym leader closed the subject with a sigh and a shake of his head, noting that he had decided not to press the matter given what was going on elsewhere in Kanto. I'm not about to invite Kasumi over, Brock grumbled, and I'm not about to give up what's always been Pewter's, but I'm not going to fight over any of it unless she keeps pushing. Shrugging, Ash leaned forward in his seat and rested his elbows on the table. I never could get a feel for her, he said. You think she can be trusted? Sure, Brock said without hesitation, to do what's best for her, which right now probably falls squarely in the territory not starting fights she doesn't have to. Now, he said, looking over at the clock, I hate to ruin the fun, but I've got a date to keep. Right, Ash acknowledged, I'll make sure you don't get lost on your way out, his tone grew playfully sarcastic. Getting up from the table, Ash and Brock left the brightly lit cafeteria and paced quickly through the gym, past bustling psychics and Sabrina's other servants, as they made their way to the roof. The night had since fallen, but by the floodlights on the roof Ash could easily spot the other trainers waiting around the makeshift landing zone, sprawled out in the open air. Bruno, having donned a heavy cloak of brown and green cloth, towered over Koga, who stood silently beside him. The shorter man turned and glanced at the new arrivals. Looking between Ash and Brock, he nodded to both of them. I understand you're the ones who disrupted my work in Fuchsia, he said with all the interest of someone discussing their last meal. That's not going to be a problem, is it? Asked Brock, stepping a little in front of Ash. If we're going to work together. You mistake my meaning, Koga's ambivalence took on a tone of amicability. I wished only to acknowledge an upstanding adversary and honor them as they deserve. He inclined his head slightly. God be with us all. A grimace overtook Bruno's features and the large man shook his head. You can keep that superstition to yourself, said the burly man. Guess I didn't expect to be the last one here. I thought you said you were going to rest. Brock added, turning to Koga. Just enough to avoid falling asleep in the saddle, the shorter man said, adjusting his gauntlets. There will be time for more meaningful sleep later. Whatever you say, said Brock. Ready to go. Unfastening a Pokeball from his belt, Koga casually tossed the little orb to the ground where it snapped open and further lit up the roof of the gym. Of course, he said politely as a Venomoth materialized from the light. Stepping up next to the Pokemon and slinging one leg over its back, the man in purple gripped the giant insect's carapace as Brock and Bruno both released winged mounts from their Pokeballs and climbed on their backs. Tapping the button on a small device on his belt, Koga turned to Brock and Bruno as the mechanism began beeping quietly and a small LED on its side blinked red. Don't fall too far behind, he said. The signal only extends out for a couple of miles. He patted the transmitter on his belt, straightened himself in the saddle, and leaned into the motion as his Venomoth darted up and into the sky. Bruno's Fearow cawed, and took a running start before flinging itself over the edge of the roof and opening its wings. Once this over, Brock looked at Ash. You owe me a beer. Sure thing, Ash nodded. Say hi to Jennifer for me. Brock smirked and checked a pocket receiver to make sure he could pick up Koga's location, before tapping his Pidgeotto sides with his heels. You can tell her yourself at the wedding. Brock shouted over his shoulder, not giving Ash a chance to answer before the older trainer had taken to the air. Good luck. Wedding. Ash cocked his head to one side a little before a grin settled on his lips. Brock, you dog. He turned around and began to walk forward, stopping short when he spotted a figure standing at the stairwell's entrance. He reflexively reached for his belt, but cut the motion off when he realized it was Agatha waiting for him at the door to the gym. I don't suppose you would have a moment to talk, said the old woman, stepping forward with her hands idly behind her back. Before we leave for Indigo, I mean. Sure, Ash nodded. I hear ignoring the Elite Four tends to be hazardous to your health anyway. Turning quickly towards the south, both trainers focused on the flash of white light illuminating the surrounding buildings from the street below. A colossal roar split the air, and a moment later a tremendous rush of air whipped up over the edge of the room and buffeted Ash and Agatha as they made their way to the guardrail to look over. Agatha's deep purple dress whipped in the wind as the trainers glanced down just in time to spy the enormous Draco Knight roar again and leap into the air. The rider on the dragon's back gripped the edges of his saddle firmly as the Draco Knight snapped its wings down and sped into the dark sky, angling south. Wow, Ash muttered, mentally comparing this Draco Knight to the one he had seen Claire ride in Cinnabar. That thing's huge. Agatha nodded and smiled to herself. That's Lance, she said, folding her arms in front of her chest. Such a misdirected bent for the dramatic. She shook her head. One of these days he'll learn. Anyway, Ash leaned on the guardrail. What did you want to talk about? Right, said the old woman. She composed herself. There's really no way to put it that won't sound strange, but you've changed quite a lot since we first met in Lavender. Ash smirked. Changed sides, changed missions, changed ideals. And you've changed spiritually, I think, Agatha mentioned. I spoke with your haunter earlier. He had some interesting things to tell me. Ash raised an eyebrow, suddenly very aware of his ghost's absence. You can see it. Agatha chuckled. Now that you're wondering, he's dormant in the basement and should be ready to go in shortly. And yes, I can see ghosts. My family's been working with spirits since before Lavender founded Celadon. I've personally had dealings with spirits since I was old enough to talk. You learn many things, walking with ghosts, some of it actually useful, most of it less so. Most spirits don't remember their past lives. They're merely entities lingering around this world, killing time before departing for whatever comes after from which they don't come back. Every now and then, however, a medium will come across a ghost that's both in possession of knowledge and willing to share it. I take it you picked up a useful fact that you think I could use. Ash probed. Nodding and resting her hands on the guardrail, Agatha looked over at Ash and then at the ground below. When we met in Lavender you had a spark about you. I mean that quite literally. There was a spark of spiritual fire like a single point of faint light that hung in the air around you. I've seen them before. Anyone who spends enough time around ghosts eventually begins to see like they do. Through this world to the one underneath. Catching glimpses of people's spirits is normal, but I've rarely seen one that manifested as anything more than a fine. She searched for words, a fine mist that hung about wherever the person walked. Yours on the other hand was by comparison unmistakably bright and focused. At the time it was odd, but I thought little of it. Now however, she stared intently, now that we've met again I see that the single point of light has grown. It looks more like a burning crown than a bead. For all my chiding Lance about his wardrobe, I must admit, yours is quite dramatic and it doesn't look terrible. Ash stammered, thanks. Well, I had never seen anything like that before, Agatha continued, so imagine my surprise when not one but two people in the same day walked up to me, both wearing their spirits like burning helmets. That May girl, hers isn't quite as bright as yours, but it's definitely there. That event in and of itself would have made any medium flinch, so imagine my further surprise when it lined up perfectly with a divination I witnessed as a child. Ash made no effort to hide the interest on his face. There was a prediction about me? He asked. It didn't point to how this is all going to turn out, did it? Isn't it funny how such things are always vague enough to be interpreted with dozens of theories, any of which can make slight sense when viewed from just the right angle? Agatha grinned. The ritual resulted in the spirit of a very powerful psychic being pulled back from the grave. He chose to speak to me, for which my mother, who paid for the expensive ritual, never forgave me. Jabez was what he told me to call him, and he said that before he died he had one vision that he regretted never revealing to anyone. Agatha paused for a brief second. Just a moment. I want to tell this properly. He said that before my years were up, he saw all the people in the world stood in a brightly lit field as a dark cloud rose in the north to erase everything good that had ever been. Most didn't see it, but anyone who did was overwhelmed when they saw the darkness and ran towards it, trying to take others with them, calling out that there was no fighting so they might as well embrace it. It was only when the darkness had all but overtaken everyone that anyone capable of driving it away emerged. There were 4 figures, 2 men and 2 women, each wearing a crown of fire. 3 of them commanded a third of the people not overwhelmed by the darkness. The first was a man who rode on a bolt of fire without being burned, and he commanded an army of countless undying soldiers that obeyed his orders without hesitation of thought. He was the backbone of the resistance, binding the other three together. The second was a woman who could shake the very foundations of the world with her iron will. She ruled in the east and stood as a bulwark against the darkness, uprooting mountain ranges and draining whole seas in her fight to protect the rest of the world from the encroaching dark. The third was a king in the west with a golden spirit that shone so bright even the blackest pits of the darkness couldn't dim it. He and his soldiers were to drive like a spear into the heart of the darkness's army, piercing it.
Agatha trailed off.
And the fourth?
Ash asked, attention completely bound up in the old woman's words.
What about her? Her part is the saddest by far,
Agatha muttered.
She has to lose everything to warn the other three of the darkness's coming. What that means I'm not sure, and neither was the ghost, but it was clear that the fourth's part in the prophecy is the most important. One can prepare all they like for a threat, but if it comes on them with no warning while they sleep then victory is impossible. In the same way, I feel it will be the fourth who sounds the alarm and rallies the other three against the darkness. She'll hopefully foil its plan to strike in secret, but if she doesn't...
Agatha grinned as if to hide a frown.
Then I fear you two will be the least of our worries. Getting back to the part that involves you,
the old woman's tone lightened noticeably.
The part you care about, I'm sure. I'd hazard to guess that, as you're neither a king nor very far west, the man riding the bolt of fire was you. May must either be the fourth or the woman in the east, though I can't say which. Poor thing, either way her part isn't a happy one.
She looked at Ash.
Either way she's going to need friends when the time comes.
Ash cleared his throat.
Well,
he said.
I can't say I've ever been part of a prophecy before, or that one really gave me too much hope. I didn't claim it would be a joyous thing.
Agatha grinned at him.
But I spent a long time memorizing that spiel and I'll be damned if I wasn't going to make some use of it before I die. Especially now that I've met someone featured in it. So you think it's real?
Ash asked.
It might be,
Agatha shrugged.
Or it could be the insane ramblings of a mad ghost. I lean towards the former, but either way it was supposed to happen during my lifetime and I'm not getting any younger. So there you have it.
Thanks, Ash said, looking back down into the street.
I'll keep it in mind.
Without further conversation, the two trainers waited on the roof, accompanied only by the hum of the floodlights and the occasional gusts of wind to break up the silence. The neon lights of Saffron's inner city lit up the skyline around the gym, trails of light silently racing up and down and all over the sides of the skyscrapers.
Does May actually know she's supposed to meet us up here?
Ash asked after some time had passed. Before Agatha could answer, the door to the roof's maintenance stairway opened and both May and Sabrina stepped out into the open air, May sporting a suit of armor identical to Ash's. The new arrivals spotted Ash and Agatha at the same time that Agatha and the young gym leader recognized the other trainers.
Never mind,
Ash grinned, straightening up and looking May over before turning to Sabrina.
Do you always give out such expensive gifts?
He asked good-naturedly.
It will do more good keeping my allies alive than it will sitting in a storeroom,
Sabrina answered.
Besides,
she smirked,
I have more money than I could use in 10 lifetimes. Why shouldn't I throw a little here and there now and then?
I'll have to remember that for later, Ash thought, twitching a second later as he felt Haunter's presence glide up onto the roof. Silently he acknowledged the ghost as Haunter floated invisibly up beside him.
You look good,
he said to May. The girl in the black armor held her arms out to her sides and did a little spin.
I like it, she said. Much more stylish than that drab stuff I brought from Johto. Lighter too.
Sabrina folded her arms in front of her chest.
Tougher too. It's the best and something tells me you'll need it.
She paused and walked over to Ash.
Good luck,
she said.
If you happen to see your father, give him my best. I'll do that,
Ash answered, making every effort to sound as polite as possible.
Good luck yourself.
Nodding and mentioning that she had to start getting her people ready, Sabrina took her leave and left Agatha with the two younger trainers.
Right then,
the old woman checked her watch.
If we ride hard and fast, stopping only to sleep, we should be able to make it to Indigo in short order, 2 days if the weather's with us.
Drawing up a memory of Kanto's geography, Ash tried to plot out a course that could get them there that quickly.
You realize, he said, we'll be flying directly over Mount Moon,
Ash said.
Yes,
Agatha said flatly.
And there aren't exactly many great places to set down and rest in that mountain range,
the young gym leader went on.
We'll probably get there late, just about the time that we'll really need sleep.
Yes, Agatha repeated.
If you don't think you can stay up a little longer that you would like, if you think you'll get too stiff in that saddle, I'm sure we can find a nice hotel in Cerulean or... Wait.
Agatha smirked.
Point taken,
Ash muttered.
Wasn't Cerulean just captured?
May asked, confused. Glancing between each other first, Ash and Agatha turned and looked silently at May.
Oh,
the youngest trainer's eyes opened wide.
That was the joke.
Agatha nodded and plucked a Pokeball from her belt.
Oh boy,
she sighed. As Agatha threw her Pokeball to the ground, releasing a flood of white energy that swirled into a winged form, Ash and May both went for their belts and did the same. A few seconds later, the three trainers shared the roof with Ash's Pidgeot, May's Swallow, and an enormous bat that stood twitching and jerking in front of Agatha. Running a hand through her Swallow's feathers, May looked to Ash.
Not riding Charizard?
She asked.
Pidgeot's better for cruising long distances and she's not quite as mean in a fight,
Ash answered.
If we're attacked in the air, I want Charizard as free as he can be and I'd slow him down some.
He looked over at Agatha as she climbed up on her Pokemon's back, pulling herself up into a natural crevice between the massive bat's four wings where she settled in without a saddle. For a second, idly scratching Pidgeot's head and playing with her crest as she cooed against him, Ash watched the bat as it spasmed and twitched, clicking its teeth together and tapping its clawed feet anxiously at the roof.
I've never seen a Pokemon like that before,
he said.
What is it?
Acrobat, Agatha answered.
Is everyone ready to go?
Ash swung a leg over Pidgeot's back and strapped himself into the saddle using one fluid motion as May climbed atop Swallow and methodically secured herself to the Pokemon.
Lead the way,
Ash answered. Splitting the air with a hiss of wind, Agatha and her Crobat shot into the sky, the Pokemon's purple wings blurring out of sight. A second later Swallow and Pidgeot both jumped over the edge of the rooftop, opening their wings and gliding for a moment before angling upwards and climbing into the night sky, chasing after Agatha as the older trainer switched on a flashlight and signaled for the others to follow her. Breaking above the low-hanging clouds and into the plentiful light of a full moon, Agatha turned off the flashlight and leveled off as Ash and May fell in beside her. The three trainers angled west and north, speeding along as their shadows twisted and danced on the clouds beneath them. As Ash and May closed their helmets, sealing themselves off from the biting cold of the wind, Haunter reached out for Ash's attention from the young gym leader's backpack. "Going off to fight the psychic?" asked the ghost. Ash nodded.
"Looks like it," he whispered.
"Powerful old lady," said the psychic, stunned all the other leaders. "Why not finish them there? Why show himself? Why not let everyone fight each other?" Ash thought for a second and shrugged.
"I'm not sure. But Blaine said Mewtwo's a genius. Either that was a big lapse in judgment, or he's trying to maneuver us all into position for something."
"Hope it's the first one, since now we're all flying straight to his lair."
"Me too,"
Ash swallowed the lump forming in his throat.
"Hopefully he won't see this coming. But if he does..."
The young trainer risked a glance at the Master Ball on his belt.
"Hopefully I'll be ready."
End of chapter.